So, hi, I'm Joy Vernon with the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup, and our topic today is Tarot Tableau. And Tarot Tableau are ways of laying out the major arcana cards so that you can find patterns in them and as a result, learn more about the cards themselves as they relate to other cards. So let's get started. I've got a little bit of a slideshow that introduces some of these concepts. And so let's just start with that. Okay. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. I'm going to talk just about why we lay out card arrangements, and then I'm going to cover several that I think are particularly interesting. The Lemniscate layout, the Analemma arrangement, the B.O.T.A tarot tableau, and a little one that I developed called the Day-Night-Resurrection. I'll also cover some other really common ways of arranging cards in order to, again, get insight into them. So card arrangements, my first deck was the Barbara Walker Tarot. And in her book that goes with that deck, she suggested laying out the cards in two lines. And I'm pretty sure it was 1 through 10 and then 11 through 20. And then the Fool was at the very beginning, and then the World was at the very end. So there was two lines of 10, and then they were kind of as almost parentheses or brackets around the two lines was the Fool and the World. And and I don't remember all the points that she made, but the one thing that really caught my eye, and I remember her talking about, was that when you did that, now she had strength as 11 because she was following more of a Thoth pattern. You had the Magician at 1 at the beginning of the top row, and then you had 11, which in her deck was strength, at the beginning of the second row. And both of them have that Lemniscate pattern in their hats. If you're following a Tarot de Marseille style, or just the Lemniscate over their heads, if you're following Rider-Waite-Smith. And she was following more the Marseille style. And so that was really interesting to me. And with that being my first deck, a lot of times I still tend to think of strength as 11, just because it just that I'm sure she said a lot more in that chapter than just that one little point, but it was something that really like grabbed onto me. And just the whole idea of this one Lemniscate starting this first row, and then the second Lemniscate starting the second, and how those two rows played off of each other. And just working through that and thinking through that really helped me in a lot of ways understand certain things about the cards. And that's just like one little thing from one little deck. And so that's kind of what I want to do today, is just introduce you to a lot of little things. And if you want to take any one of those things and explore it and expand on it and go somewhere with it, you can. Any one of these things is designed to open up into lots of different ways of finding relationships between the cards. Later, I came across the Tarot of the Magicians by Oswald Worth. And that's this book here. Now, he has a lot of different arrangements that he uses in here. He just starts with just putting the cards in a circle, which is also like the Major Arcana, which is also a nice thing to do. He does the B.O.T.A tableau, but he also has these different ways of dividing it up and understanding it and his own insights into it. And he does it from a couple different perspectives, including a Kabbalistic perspective and some other things like that. And he has probably a couple chapters where he discusses different ways of, again, arranging the cards and then therefore making correlations between them. And that's the main thing when you're working with this kind of thing. The pattern itself, the importance of the pattern is that it creates relationships between the cards. And when you have these relationships, then you can understand the cards based on those relationships. And all of a sudden, they're not just random cards, but they relate to each other in a certain way, producing certain meanings as a result. Another one that another layout that I came across early on was from this book, The Tarot by Alfred Douglas. And because everybody always asks, no, this is not the Alfred Douglas that was lovers with Oscar Wilde. This is an Alfred Douglas that was born in the 40s. But as a frontispiece of his book, he has this lemniscate pattern. And that one's shown here. And you can see that it starts here with the Fool and then goes around with about, including going, let's see, 0 through 9 is 10. So it has 10 in the loop, and then the 11th here, and then 10 more in this loop, and the 22nd here. And so those are the two crossing cards of this lemniscate layout. One of the things, again, I'll just say that a lot of these things I find very interesting, but I'm not an expert on any one of these. And so that's why I'm here to just introduce the idea to you and give you some just some good patterns to start with and familiarize yourself with. Just little things that you can notice is, okay, well, which cards are in this loop over on this side? Just that first set of the Fool through the Hermit. And, what about the ones over here? It starts with strength and goes around, and they're obviously using strength as 11 here, and goes around with the other set. It's kind of like laying out the two rows, really, in a lot of ways in terms of breaking it down. You can make pairs of cards and just notice, like, the Fool and Strength together, the Magician and the Hanged Man. You could do the Fool and Judgment together, the Magician and the Sun. And so those are just things to look at, things to work with. Now, Hal taught me a different lemniscate layout, and I really like his better. So let's take a look at that. And I actually found this online. That's the Major Arcana from his deck that he designed, the Wick Willow, and it looks like it's laid out on top of his auto harp case. He talked about it when we did the unfurling the leaves of the Tarot de Marseille. He does the lemniscate so that it crosses, and it's a little bit hard to see here, but it crosses at the wheel, which is 10, and the Judgment card, which is 20. And so the wheel is X and the Judgment card is XX. And then he puts the Fool on inside the loop on the left and the World card inside the loop on the right. You can see how he's got it laid out here. He's got the it goes down from the Fool here to the Magician here. And then we've got the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, the Emperor, the Hierophant, the Lovers. So 6, 7, 8, he's got Strength in as 8, 9, and then 10 on the bottom, which is the wheel. And then going forward, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, the star, 18, the moon, 19, the sun, and then again, 20, Judgment is here, and the World is over here. One of the really nice things about the layout here is that I believe there are there are ways that the cards add up. So if you get the Magician is 1 and the Sun is 19, that adds up to 20. The High Priestess is 2 and 18 for the Moon, that's 20. I think I'm doing this right. If you go to the Empress is 3 and the Star 17, they add up to 20 all the way around. And so finding those little pairs that way is very interesting. Of course, the crossing pair adds up to 30, and then 0 and 21 adds up to 21. And so again, there's something a little bit more elegant about this version than the Alfred Douglas version, although I think both are really interesting. One of the things that can happen, and I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if you can really tell. Usually, yeah, usually one side. So see how the Magician is facing out and the High Priestess is facing out. All of these are facing out. And then when it crosses, I believe it's hard to see. The picture's a little bit blurry. Or maybe it's just my eyes. Then when you cross over, these are all facing inward. The 17, 18, 19. And so you can see these are facing outward, and then going this way, starting here, going around, this is facing outward, and this is facing inward. And that to me is one of the things that really, like a number of factors really were interesting to me when I started looking at this, but that was one of the biggest ones, that the first set of cards, that from 1 through 9, that first loop is outward directed, that they are looking out towards the outside. And those cards are usually associated with living your life, going through your usual stages of just development, as a person, through stages of adulthood and whatnot and such like that. And then after we get to the wheel, which turns it turns and faces inward. And then starting with 11, 12, 13, 14, all of these are facing inward towards the center. And that to me is really powerful way of looking at things. And even putting the Fool here, the Fool is starting his journey going outward, and then in order to conclude the journey with the world, you have to at some point turn inward. And so I really like this layout and think that it's a particularly useful one. So here's another one that I thought this was in Rena Shesso's book. This is a friend of mine, Rena Shesso. She's got a couple books. One of them is called, what is it called? A Magical Tour of the Night Sky. There's a newer edition out. This edition is no longer available. The new edition is called Planets for Pagans, and it's got a different cover, but it's the same book. She has 2 or 3 pages on the Analemma in there, and I thought she had this tarot layout in the book, but she doesn't. And so I think she must have talked to me about it maybe in a meetup, or maybe just when, just hanging out sometime. But the Analemma is the shape that the sun makes in the sky. The person photographs the sun standing in the same spot, or else they just permanently set up their camera somehow and photograph the sky. And they usually use a filter to filter out the brightness of the sun. And they photograph the sky like once a week or something, always at the same time of day. It has to be the same time of day. And then every day for a year. And this is a pattern that the sun makes, and that's called the Analemma. And the highest point when the sun is the highest in the sky is around the summer solstice. And when it's the lowest in the sky is around the winter solstice. And it crosses Now, you would think it would cross right exactly at the equinox, but usually the equinox positions are somewhere in here. So that's a little bit to me in terms of my wanting patterns to work out. It's a little bit frustrating, but this is usually around April, these crossing points. And then March and September are right in here. So this is coming in through August. And this is shown right here. This is not the same photographer. It's a different photographer, just showing when he made all of his photographs. And so June is at small n, July, August, that must be August 29th, and then April 5th here and April 20th here. So August and April is when that crossed. And then going on into September around here through December and so on. So that's what an analemma is. And then Rena does this pattern where she lays out the cards in a kind of lemniscate pattern, but based on the analemma and not an evenly divided lemniscate like in the other pattern. Well, in the way she taught it to me, it is this with it crossing at the equinoxes. The Emperor here and the Justice card here, Emperor being Aries and Justice being Libra. And those are the two equinox points. One of the things that's really interesting is, of course, if you lay this, when you lay this out, if you use, well, you have to use the justice as 11 in order to get this one to work. If you use strength as 11, it doesn't work because you get justice over here and you get strength here, and you don't have the two equinox points. And that's just very simply, I think it relates. We talked before about how all the correspondences for the cards derive from the Hebrew letters in order, and that those Hebrew letters prior to tarot had associations assigned to them already, including the planets and the signs. And so that's why the Golden Dawn switched, is to get justice to match up with Libra, because the symbolism of the scales is the same, and strength to match up to Leo. Again, there's a lion on the card. It just seems super obvious. But this is a nice little reiteration of that, is that if justice had stayed over here instead of moving into number 11, you wouldn't really be able, the loop would be so small, I don't think it would even work. So that's just, to me, that's just a really nice little thing to kind of work with and study. Again, and I laid this out this morning and took a photograph of it. I was trying to keep the cards just going straight, and I laid the Emperor out first and Justice next. And so I just followed, I kind of kept the cards going. I started inward and then moved them outward, and maybe I should have done it the opposite way. Some of the things that are nice about this in terms of getting different arrangements and different patterns to look for, it starts over here with the Fool and then goes through the Magician, the High Priestess, the Empress, and then we get to our equinox crossing point. But it gives you this summary loop with just a few cards over here. Some of this is mostly due to the way the Hebrew letters were assigned to the planets and the signs. But it's interesting to see when you do that, what cards end up in this bigger loop, which is the September through December, through the spring and back to the equinox. And then this one is the summer and the fall, from April through, or from March 21st to September 21st. So again, gives you a lot to think about, a lot to work with, a lot of kind of divisions to make and kind of like explore what makes these cards kind of stand out. What about this bigger pattern over here? What would you discover if you explored that symbolically? So coming on in now, all of this leads up to the Master Tarot Tableau, which is the B.O.T.A one. So one of the things about the B.O.T.A symbolism is that the top row here represents powers or potencies. And this is what he says in this book, in the Tarot Key to the Wisdom of the Ages. The second row are the laws or agencies, and the third row are the conditions or effects. And so what he's saying here is that these powers through these agencies affect these conditions. And then there are these levels of spiritual unfoldment, which is from a different book. Hal had to explain all this to me because he's done all the B.O.T.A stuff and I haven't. So the levels of spiritual unfoldment are bondage, awakening, revelation, organization, regeneration, realization, and cosmic consciousness. And those 7 levels of spiritual unfoldment match specifically these 7 cards on the bottom. Bondage is the devil, awakening is the tower, revelation is the star, and those make perfect sense. And you've probably even heard those, even if you haven't studied this, you've probably heard most of these most of these labels applied to these cards before, because it's pretty common knowledge. I just haven't personally studied it very much. So these are the 7 levels of spiritual unfoldment. And so then you have this power working through this agency, affecting this condition, and the level that it's working at is the level of bondage. And so, and that's a really nice way of putting this all together and being able to study it, work with it, meditate on it, and so on. So you can just see, just right off the top of my head, one of the first things I noticed when I looked at it that way was that the magician, who of course brings that power from above, brings spiritual power into his work. And he uses that spiritual power that he has brought down, and he uses it through this agency of the calming the animal instincts or whatever, and putting them under his spiritual will, and that affects his ability to release himself from bondage, and so on and so forth. And you can go through each of these groups. One of the things that I noticed when laying this out this time around, again, just right away, is that our crossing cards from the Analemma, our Emperor and our Justice card, end up in the same row. And they've got the Fool and the Moon as well. Well, the Emperor is Aries, Justice is Libra, the Moon is Pisces. So Aries starts the cycle, and Pisces ends the cycle, and Justice is the halfway point. And so just even without using Paul Foster Case's information, there's still little things, and the Fool jumps into this cycle that goes through this this kind of astrological sequence as well. So there's other interesting things. This card on this side plus this, if you take the middle row and do this card plus this card, they average out to, so 5 and 3 is 8, which averages to 4. 6 and 2 is 8, which averages to 4. Here we've got 12 and 10, so that's 22, averages to 11. And you can do that with all the pairs on either side in any row, and it will add up and the average of those will be the number of the card in the middle. So there's some fun numerological things you can do too if you like playing with numbers. So the last one that I wanted to show you is this Day-Night-Resurrection Tableau. And this is an arrangement of the Tarot Major Arcana depicting the soul cycle of reincarnation. And I have something up on my blog. I have this image that I put together for my blog, and I talk about it a little bit there, but I developed it as a way of one, explaining the major arcana to my students, and two, I was really, when I first started studying Kabbalah, I really got obsessed with the 1273 numbers, and so laying out 12 cards, which you'll notice a lot of the other patterns I'd come across had either half the cards, so 11 and then 11, or they had 10 and 10 with the Fool and World outside. And so this was my innovation, was to do 12. And so it ends with justice. And then we get the Hanged Man, which is the descent into the inner life things, death, or the beyond life things. And you can take it psychologically and look at it just as like internal work. But I like to look at it as a soul cycle of reincarnation. So this descent into death, and then part of the symbolism of temperance, according to some sources, is that pouring water from one cup into another cup, or from one vessel into another vessel, is symbolic of the soul be moving or transitioning from one physical body into a new physical body. And then that can bring about in just the corporeal experience of the devil. And I like to talk about the tower as an awakening is the one that Paul Foster Case uses. I like to think of it as whether or not you can remember past life experiences or not. And the devil is being corporeal, but not having any memory of being beyond the cycle, whereas the tower is gaining that memory. I'm going to mention the cube of space in a little bit, and I'm pretty sure I came up with this on my own. I didn't study the cube of space until after I had developed this, but that turns out to be really similar to the philosophies of the cube of space. So I mentioned that in the blog post that I wrote. And then once we have these memories, then we have this more experience of being able to really be in the flow and being connected spiritually and materially, and having that be a constant flow, as opposed to this kind of separation that we have here. And then the moon is being able to, walk the path and advance through that. And then we have the resurrection, which and of course, like I said, I hadn't really studied the B.O.T.A materials. And so regeneration is the word that he uses here. And that makes a lot of sense. I had resurrection. With all three of these being the sun, judgment, and the world being the stage of resurrection. One of the things that I mentioned, this I usually interpret, I don't want to go into all the details of every card, but I do usually interpret this fairly standard as just the, again, person's life, basic life events and that kind of stuff. But then one of the things that I talk about is that when we get to the Wheel of Fortune, that is a repeat. And you go back to the Fool again, and you have to live this a number of times. Justice is the character who evaluates whether or not adjudicates whether or not you can progress into the next level. And if justice so evaluates, I my metaphysics is a little iffy on this one. I've talked about it a number of different ways. You still have to go through the death cycle, but you don't come out of it into the sun. You go back, which is the resurrection and the enlightenment. You go back and repeat it without that memory. And so then I had this theory that according to this layout, once I laid it out, it appeared that if you navigated this initial life sequence, once you got to the point where you could navigate it really authentically and truthfully, then when you get to the Wheel of Fortune, you can jump from here to the resurrection cycle, and there's not so much of the descent that has to happen. Again, my metaphysics are probably a little bit iffy on some of this, but it's just what I discovered when I laid it out in this particular pattern, which again is kind of the point of all of these. It's just like, try different patterns that are important to you for some reason, and see what you learn about the cards when you do it. Other patterns, again, the positions of the cards on the tree of life, now that I am an expert on and can talk about intelligently, and the cube of space, which I'm not an expert on, but I have studied with a group, and so we got a lot of really good insights doing that. So thank you as always for attending. Please visit my website, joyvernon.com, for information, classes, to schedule a reading. My blog, completelyjoyous.com. Of course, follow all of our great events at the Greater Seattle Tarot Meetup. And you can subscribe to Joy Vernon Astrology, Tarot, Reiki on YouTube. And that's why I say I'm not an expert on any one of these, because it's not about being an expert. It's about every single individual applying their own meditative process to any one of these layouts and seeing what they learn from it. There's fun insights, there's more powerful insights. And, and Hal's just idea, the way he turned it so that there was cards that were facing out and then cards that were facing in on the curve. I mean, really profound insights when you look at that. This is not about, it can be about, but I don't think it should be. It can be about, studying what somebody else has learned, and you can just make a research project out of reading different people's insights. You'll find blogs where people talk about what they've learned by examining these combinations of cards, but that's not important. What's important is the insights that you get when you look at it. And so, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to point out a few things about each one, but not like explore every single thing in depth, because it's what do you see when you look at it? And it's designed, and this is why Paul Foster Case does his little, it's like, you will get insight when you look at this. You will need a paper and pencil to write down the profound information that you receive from spirit when you begin to study this. It's about opening our own minds so that our intuition is stronger, so that our connection to spirit is stronger, and so that we have more guidance in our lives. And so the tarot becomes guidance, not just through laying out readings so that we can get information about our own lives and what's coming up for us, and just regular divination, but actually through using the cards and studying the cards and meditating on the cards, it opens our connection to spirit. I'm just going to use that generally, but to a bigger, wider open place that information comes from. And then we don't need to lay out cards to see how our day is going to go or whatever, because we're in tune with that, and we're always connected to that. And so this, it is about you making your own efforts into the layouts, and each one of those layouts is flush with all kinds of information that can take you could spend hours, you could spend weeks, you could spend years on any one of these layouts. So that's what this is just a little bit of an introduction to get you started. Well, thanks everybody for coming, and I'm going to let us all go early, and I will see you in 2 weeks, and we'll dive into this a little deeper.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joy. Always wonderful.
Yes, thank you
Have
so
a good
much.
weekend, everybody.
Thanks, Joy.